Hey everyone, welcome to Ghost Tour China. I'm your tour guide Amanda. Today, I'm taking you back to Shanghai's most bizarre and terrifying house, the Lin Family House No. 37. Now you might be wondering why I said back to instead of visiting. Well, that's because this house doesn't exist anymore. If you walk to the original site on Wuning Road today, all you will see is a modern workers' housing complex. Every day, residents going about their lives, just ordinary daily routines. But beneath this seemingly normal piece of land lies Shanghai's darkest secret. If you ask any Shanghai local, especially the older folks, almost none of them haven't heard of this address. Because over 60 years ago, something absolutely mind-bending happened here that shocked the entire city. This case involved paranormal phenomena, bodies that wouldn't decay, a suspect with no brain, moving talismans, a sorcerer who vanished into walls, and even worse, none of it has ever been fully explained. Some of the detectives involved even quit the force afterward. So tonight, we're going back to where it all began, that cold, eerie night in 1956. Just a heads up, everything you're about to hear comes directly from the detectives who were actually there. This isn't a horror story I made up. This is real. On a deep night in 1956, the phone at the Wuning Road police station suddenly rang. A young police officer picked up. Through the phone came heavy breathing, followed by a voice that was neither male nor female. Absolutely bone-chilling.
I killed someone. I want to turn myself in.
Alright, just hold on. Where exactly are you?
Wuning Road, number 37.
Well, that was only 3 blocks from the station. Who would be bold enough to commit murder right under the cops' noses? Sensing something serious, the young detective alerted his chief. Within minutes, a team was mobilized and they rushed to the scene. Back then, Wuning Road was still part countryside, farmland mixed with old houses. At night, it was dark and dead quiet. Following the address, they found Lin Family House No. 37, a 2-story Western-style house with brick walls, quite impressive looking. As they opened the gate, a sudden gust of wind swirled through the yard, almost like the house was warning them. Once inside, police called out loudly, asking if anyone was in the house, but got no response. Sensing something was amiss, they prepared to push the door open, only realized it had been barricaded from inside. At this point, officers from the local precinct also arrived on scene. After some discussion, they learned that the current residents were the Ye Xianguo family of 4. Ye Xianguo himself, his wife who had a limp, and their 2 children, a son and a daughter. They moved from Hebei to Shanghai for work. Hearing this, the senior detective got anxious and decided to smash the door open. But the young detective suggested climbing through a window instead. However, this young cop probably had no idea that what he was about to face would become a nightmare that would haunt him for decades. The moment he jumped into the room, he felt something wrong under his feet. It was a wet and sticky sensation. At the same time, the air was thick with a heavy smell of blood. The senior detective followed him in, but slipped and fell hard as soon as he landed. The 2 men fumbled around to find the light switch, and when the light flicked on, they were totally shocked. The living room, about 40 square feet, was nearly empty, just a dining table and a baby stroller. But the floor was flooded with dark red blood, pooling ankle deep. The senior detective crouched down and said calmly, "This is human blood." But how could there be this much blood? Soon after, the front door was opened and all the police officers rushed in, only to be stunned by the same horrific sight. It looked like a massacre. With no hesitation, they split up and searched the whole building, but couldn't find a single corpse. Yet according to the forensics, the blood came from at least 6 people. 6. But the Ye family only had 4. Even stranger, according to the neighbors, the wife had taken the 2 children back to her parents' home several months ago, and the husband, Ye Xianguo, hadn't been seen for several days either. So, whose blood was this? And who made that terrifying phone call? For the days that followed, this case hit a complete dead end. But a month later, the precinct received a report from the neighborhood committee. Some kids said they saw the front door of the Lin family house suddenly standing wide open. This was strange. The house had been sealed off as a crime scene. Who would dare break the seal and go in? The police immediately sent people to investigate. When they entered the house, the floor was still covered with blood, dried, dark, sticky. But just as they were taking it all in, a burst of child's laughter coming from the second floor. This completely froze everyone. Then, weapons drawn, they rushed upstairs, but found absolutely no one there. However, the police surprisingly found that the baby stroller, which had originally been downstairs, was now sitting at the top of the stairs. All signs pointed to someone having broken in, but they left no traces whatsoever. Looking at the blood on the floor, the police fell into silence. How was this possible? 10 days later, another report came in. Someone had seen lights on in the Lin house again, upstairs. This alerted the police. Keep in mind, it was the early 1950s, right after mainland China had overthrown the nationalist government and established the PRC. The police suspected this might be a hideout for remaining hostile forces, so they decided to set up a nighttime stakeout. That night was unusually cold. Officers lay in wait around the house, eyes fixed on the dark windows. Finally, around dawn, a faint light flicked on inside. But it didn't look like electric light. It looked like fire. Immediately, 3 detectives entered the house, leaving 2 outside to cover the exits. Once inside, they were shocked to find that all the blood was gone, completely cleaned up, as if nothing had ever happened. Tensions high, the police quietly crept upstairs, but none of them noticed that the door slowly swinging shut behind them. The first one to reach the second floor was the lead detective. The moment he stood up, he suddenly turned around with a look of absolute terror. This scared the young detective, who quickly went up to look as well and was completely stunned too. The second floor looked nothing like before. It had turned into an elegant living room, like one from a wealthy home. In the center of the room sat a large dining table, and hanging down from the table was a snow-white arm with bright red blood dripping onto the floor. The room was extremely bright at that moment, making the scene incredibly vivid. Just as they froze there, the detective at the back suddenly shouted, "There's a ghost!" The young detective turned just in time to say something, dragging that man away into the dark. Suddenly, the room filled with the music from an old gramophone, and with it came eerie child's laughter, echoing through the house. The young detective tried to run after his colleague, but at that moment, the lights went out. So did the music and the laughter. Everything fell into pitch black silence, and all they could hear was their own breathing and pounding hearts. The young detective stumbled around, searching for his teammates. That's when a red shadow flickered across his vision, followed by another scream from his colleague. Right then, the police waiting outside also rushed in. The lights came back on, and the terror instantly vanished. But the worst part, of the 3 detectives who went in, only 2 came out. The one who was dragged away was never seen again. The incident shook the entire Shanghai police force. Specialists came to investigate in secret, but found nothing unusual. No secret rooms, no hidden tunnels, no corpse, and the missing detective was never found again. After that, the case was left unsolved. Over time, the people involved were reassigned, leaving only the young detective still in the team. And due to the technical limitations of that era, the source of that mysterious phone call could never be traced. From then on, no one lived in the Lin family house again. Even during the day, no one dared approach the place. 2 years later, people slowly stopped talking about the Lin family house. The horror faded, until one man brought it all back into the spotlight. In the winter of 1958, someone reported a counter-revolutionary, Mr. Xu. Xu was a leather craftsman by trade, but behind closed doors, he was a secret member of a cult. Okay, I'm not gonna say the name of this cult, just to avoid any unnecessary drama. At that time, this cult had quite a following in the Jiangsu and Zhejiang areas. On the surface, it looked like a religion, but in reality, it was a reactionary cult. They used things like spirit writing and divine possession to trick people, recruit followers, scam them out of money, and even worse. They claimed they could cure all diseases, but in truth, they were manipulating and abusing people, especially women. Basically, every method that cult used, they had. Later, as politics changed, most of this group was eliminated. But as far as I know, they are still operating in secret to this day. So, you know what I want to say. Stay alert. Okay, back to Xu. Once he was caught, the police interrogated him. He confessed quickly, admitting his involvement, and even gave up the names of other members in Shanghai. And that's when a familiar name showed up. Ye Xianguo, the man who once lived in Lin Family House No. 37. Even more shocking, Xu claimed he had actually met Ye Xianguo a month after the Lin house incident. Now things were getting weird. Two serious cases suddenly tangled together. The police ramped up the pressure and questioned Xu all night long, but his answers made no sense.
Where did you say Ye Xianguo? How do you know each other? I've known Ye Xianguo since I was a child. That was in 1924. Nonsense! Ye Xianguo was born in 1933. How could you have known each other back then? I swear I saw him in my hometown. It was in Wuning Mountain, Henan province. The most recent time I saw him was in November 1956 at Jade Buddha Temple. What did he tell you? What's his role in the organization? Protector Ye had already left our organization long ago. I just said hello. What's strange is that he didn't look old at all. He even looked younger than when I first knew him. But he had a mole on his face, so I recognized him immediately.
So, Ye wasn't just some low-level follower. He had once been a protector, a high-ranking figure in the cult. But if Xu was telling the truth, how had Ye stayed young for so long? A month later, Xu suddenly died in detention, and his death was nothing short of bizarre. According to his cellmates, the night before, Xu had been talking to the wall by himself, saying a lot of incomprehensible things. It seemed like he was arguing with someone, then begging for something. Everyone thought he'd lost his mind and just ignored him, but the next morning, he was still sitting in the same spot, dead. At that moment, a line of strange text had appeared on the wall, but it quickly faded away. It looked like some kind of spell or charm, but no one could make out what he actually said. Later, when the medical examiner checked the body, they found no wounds anywhere, and his face was unusually rosy, almost healthy looking. They found no signs of poisoning either, but couldn't determine the exact cause of death. Everyone couldn't help but think about that cult. Could his death somehow be connected to the cult? After all that, the task force decided to dig deeper into Ye Xianguo's background, and what they found was unbelievable. Turns out, Ye Xianguo's father was also named Ye Xianguo. And get this older Ye Xianguo also has no death record. Based on Xu's description, police figured that when Xu met a man named Ye Xianguo in the 1920s, it was likely the father. Then, when he met Ye Xianguo again in 1956, a man in his 30s, it must have been the son. This would create the illusion that Ye Xianguo never aged. But that theory opened up another strange question. Could a father and son really look exactly the same? So the investigators decided to go straight to the Wuning Mountain, Xu's hometown, to try and uncover the truth. Now, back before liberation, the Wuning Mountains were notorious for rampant bandits, and this cult also had considerable influence in this region. When police arrived at a nearby village, most people didn't even remember Xu. He had left when he was just a kid. Only one elderly man offered a clue. Xu's family had originally migrated from Bazhou in Hebei. They used to be rich, but Xu's grandfather became obsessed with tourist magic and moved to the mountains to practice it. As for Ye Xianguo, he used to be a feng shui master and was from the same hometown as Xu's grandfather. So Ye's ancestral home should be in Hebei as well. Hearing that, the team rushed to Bazhou in Hebei, and what they found was even weirder than before. According to archive materials, Ye Xianguo's father was also named Ye Xianguo, but Ye Xianguo's grandfather was also named Ye Xianguo. This was very strange. In Chinese culture, having the same name as an elder is considered disrespectful. People even avoid names that sound the same but are written differently. Why would 3 generations all have the same name? Was it just coincidence? Or could it have something to do with immortality? As they kept digging, another piece of puzzle came to light. Turns out, the Ye family wasn't some wealthy family at all, but had been temple keepers for generations and served at a local shrine called the Jade Emperor Temple. More interestingly, the temple's original founder was said to have connections to a legendary Taoist figure, Liu Zhiming. Liu Zhiming was a famous figure from the middle of the Ming dynasty. Legend says he obtained a miraculous method that could cultivate immortality and also control wind and rain. In fact, old records also say that Ye's ancestors had once successfully prayed for rain, just like Liu himself. And the locals believed the Ye family had inherited some sort of divine technique. So, could this be the key to understanding what Ye Xianguo really was? Just as the investigation was drifting deeper into the mystical, Shanghai police sent word. While tearing down the Lin family house, workers uncovered something buried 3 meters beneath the living room floor. It was a large clay jar, and inside were the remains of Ye Xianguo's wife and 2 children. But even after 2 years, these 3 people showed no signs of decay. They were quietly curled up in the jar, as if they were just sleeping. With this discovery, the case was officially reclassified as a major criminal investigation, and Ye Xianguo became the prime suspect. Soon, they issued a Class A arrest warrant, and just 2 weeks later, he was captured near the ruins of a crumbling Taoist temple on Longhu Mountain, Jiangxi. Due to the special nature of the case, Ye was held in a special solitary cell and interrogated by a team of specialists. But things quickly took another bizarre turn. Ye didn't speak at all. He just sat there, staring blankly at the ceiling, expressionless and blinking. Even stranger, he didn't eat, didn't drink, not a single drop of water passed his lip. Police conducted 2 psychiatric evaluations on him, but they showed no abnormalities. He just maintained this standoff with police for over a month. Finally, out of options, the police ordered a 3rd medical exam. This time, they took x-rays, and what they found shook everyone to the core. Ye Xianguo had no brain tissue. None. Completely hollow. Medically speaking, he shouldn't have been alive, let alone sitting upright, breathing, and blinking. So what was he? No one had an answer, and Ye Xianguo still said nothing. With no other leads, the police decided to bring him back to the crime scene. It was a cloudy April afternoon in 1959, right before the Qingming festival. Police brought Ye back to the old site of Lin Family House. The moment they arrived, a sudden wind was picking up. Dust filled the air, staining their eyes. But Ye didn't flinch. He walked right up to the ruins and suddenly burst into maniacal laughter. It echoed through the empty lot. And then, thick mist began to rise around the old site, and it became so dense that no one could see more than a few feet ahead. Afraid Ye Xianguo would try to escape, 3 detectives rushed into the mist, and that's when they discovered there were several golden lights floating in the mist, like glowing talismans. And these talismans seemed to have some kind of power that kept all the people away from them. The mist whirled and shifted for what felt like forever. Then suddenly, it cleared. But by then, Ye Xianguo had vanished, and all 3 detectives had passed out. Later, according to their recollections, after seeing the mist rise, they quickly raised their guns, warning Ye not to pull any tricks. But then something impossible happened. The demolished Lin Family House had somehow reappeared, and they found themselves standing in the living room with Chao's laughter echoing from the 2nd floor, and right in front of them, Ye Xianguo's body dissolved into smoke, drifting into the wall. They immediately fired into the wall, but a powerful force slammed into them like a wave, knocking them out instantly. After that, no trace of Ye Xianguo was ever found again, and the truth also vanished with him. In the official report, the case was quietly closed. Ye was labeled a nationalist spy who, after being exposed, murdered his family and then committed suicide. But many didn't buy that story. Years later, a friend of the old detective offered his own theory. Ye might have been a practitioner of dark twist arts, achieving longevity and living for a very long time. His wife and children were supposed to become immortal with him too, but for some unknown reason, they failed. This would explain why their bodies didn't decay. All those supernatural events, the mist, the laughter, the talisman, could have been illusions created by his spells. As for what Ye Xianguo really was, a ghost, a deity, or even a zombie, no one knows forever. Alright, that's it for today's video. As for what I think about all this, honestly, I'm not even gonna try to give an opinion. This is way beyond what I can wrap my head around. I mean, an immortal man with no brain. Every time it gets into this whole cultivation and eternal life stuff, I started wondering, is the world I know really the real world? Anyway, let's stop here for today before I fry my mental CPU. See you next time, same place. Don't miss it.